So I used to live in a small Midwestern college town. Just like most college towns, it was typical for students to throw parties and hit up the bars. I was no different than the usual college kids. On the weekends, I would party and go to the bars just like everyone else. My friends and I lived off campus, so we'd usually have to get a ride from someone after the bars. Usually, we used a safe ride to get home if we couldn't find somebody. It was a cold winter night. There was about 2 inches of snow on the ground that had accumulated from the night before. My college's basketball team had just won a big game against our arch rival, and everyone was out partying, myself included. My friends and I went to a few house parties before hitting up the bars. At the bar is when things started to go wrong. I remember getting kind of anxious being around so many people, so I ended up drinking way more than I had initially anticipated to cope. About 15 minutes before closing, I had lost track of my friends and was basically flying solo at the bar. Since I'd been drinking so much, I hadn't really paid attention to them. When the bar finally closed, I walked outside to catch a safe ride trip home because I didn't want to walk in the snow. The first one looked like it was way too crowded for me, so I decided to get on the second one. From the moment I walked in, there was something off. I could see there was other people on the bus, but all the lights had been turned off. I told the driver my address, but he didn't write it down or even say anything to me. Our driver didn't look like the usual safe ride driver. He was a lot younger than any I'd seen before, but I didn't think much of it as I shuffled around to find a seat in the darkness. As I was walking to the back, the bus driver floored it and sent me flying forward. I would have hit the ground if a good Samaritan had not caught me with his arm. I thanked him and kept moving to the back to find a seat. I could feel that the driver was speeding. He hit a right turn that once again sent me flying, but this time I fell right onto a woman seated on the bus. I apologized to the person, but decided I would just sit next to them for my own safety. When I finally sat down, the lights came on. The driver continued to recklessly speed, and it caused passengers to fly around their seats like rag dolls. I could tell this was extremely unsafe, but I just wanted to get home. After about a minute of this, a large, muscular guy in a purple hoodie had enough and began screaming at the driver to slow down. The driver decided to stop the bus and pull the keys out. He told the man in purple to leave his bus if he didn't like it. It looked like the man in the purple wanted to scrap with the bus driver, but a woman with him convinced him not to, and they both decided to leave. When the couple was off, the bus driver announced something that made my stomach drop. "Just so y'all know, I'm not a safe ride or public transport. This is my fucking bus." He then stuck the keys back in and sped off once again. I was now kind of freaking out, because I genuinely did not know who this guy was or why he would be picking up strangers with his own bus. I could also hear that his words were slurred, and there was a chance that he could have been drinking. I decided to lie by shouting to the front of the bus and saying, "Hey man, my house is nearby here. Can you just let me off?" I didn't get a response. Now, I was really scared, because I had absolutely no idea where this guy was going. After about a minute, we reached a stop sign. I shot to the front as fast as I could and said my house was right around the corner and told him just to open the doors. I remember he looked over at me with a cold, lifeless gaze. He then gave me a creepy little smile and said, "All right, buddy." I could smell the alcohol in his breath. It's clear he'd been drinking. He opened the doors, I jumped out and began walking home. After just a few moments, I saw a cop car pull the bus over. I didn't stick around to see what happened since it was so cold out. I didn't read anything about it on the news the next day, nor did I hear from anyone what happened with the driver. But I haven't seen that bus nor its driver since. To this day, I have no idea where the fuck he was headed or what his plans were. But I don't think it was anything good. I, like many Americans, have trouble sleeping at night. I have a pretty high-stress job that requires long hours. During these long hours, I will ingest pretty high amounts of caffeine to stay alert. While this method helped at first, over time the excessive amount of caffeine prevented me from sleeping at night. Instead of just cutting back on my caffeine intake, I decided to start taking sleeping pills. The pills helped me go to bed, but they came with a terrifying cost. Sleep paralysis. Sleep paralysis is a temporary inability to move or speak that occurs when waking up or falling asleep. During these episodes, people can experience nightmares, hallucinations, or even see figures. I only experienced it a few times. Usually it felt like someone was just touching me, but I did not see any figures, except once. During that night, I'd gone home from a pretty rough day at work. As usual, I had a high caffeine intake from a few cups of coffee and an energy drink. It's hard to explain, but it's like I was exhausted and jittery at the same time. It was 12 a.m. when I took my sleeping pills. I took more than my usual dose because my next shift was at 7 a.m. the next morning and I wanted to get to sleep soon. I like to keep the TV on at night to help me sleep. The pills hit me pretty fast and I was out in about 5 minutes. I have a small Pomeranian in my place. Her name is Bella and she's pretty territorial. She always barks at other people when she sees them. I keep her on the bed with me when I go to sleep. I don't know what time it was when I woke up, but I remember hearing Bella barking at something. I slightly opened my eyes to see what was going on. That's when I saw it. There was a tall figure near the entrance of my room. I tried to move around, but I couldn't. It felt like my whole body had been tied down. I tried to scream, but no sound was coming out. I was experiencing sleep paralysis once again. The figure crept closer towards me. The light of my television slightly illuminated him. The side of his face looked like an old man, like late 50s or early 60s. Bella continued to bark at him, but it didn't affect him. He reached the front of my bed and just stood there. I began thrashing around as best I could in an attempt to wake myself up, but nothing was working. The figure just continued to stare at me before eventually turning around and walking away. After what seemed like hours, I was able to wake myself up. I was breathing heavily and completely freaked out. It took me about 15 minutes before I could calm myself down and realize what happened. I didn't go back to sleep that night. I just sat on my bed and waited for the morning. That's when the real terror began. Around 6 a.m. is when I got up to get ready for work. When I flipped the lights on, I saw something that still terrifies me to this day. There were muddy footprints in my room, and the shoe size was much larger than mine. I followed the friends to my front door. The lock was broken, and there was a muddy footprint on the door. He had kicked it open that night. Immediately, I called the police and told them about what had happened. When I described what I had seen the night before, the cops told me they knew someone who would have done this. There was a local homeless guy named Ned who was known to break into people's houses. But what's weird is that he would never steal anything. He would just go into their bedrooms and stare at them, usually while they slept. Ned clearly has some serious psychological issues. He was arrested and charged with breaking and entering. I'm not sure where he is now, but I hope he's getting the help he needs. That night, there wasn't anything stopping him from hurting my dog and I. Since this incident, I've been getting proper treatment for my sleep disorders and I'm doing much better. But that night will haunt me forever.